we are now being joined by John Cookson in Lviv for an update on Ukraine's invasion by Russia. Good morning, Mr. Cookson.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Great to be on the morning show here from Western Ukraine. A bitterly cold day today. I suppose the big story out of here at the moment is the possibility of this tantalizing prospect of peace. Peace talks due to get underway by video connection between both sides. That's Moscow and Kyiv at around an hour from now. Now, we don't know what negotiations are actually what specifics are on the table, but in the past the Russians have asked for Ukraine not to become a member of NATO or the EU. They've asked Ukraine to cease hostilities and to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. These are big asks of Ukraine, and Ukraine also has its demands for Russians to stop their military activity in this country. Now, whether any of this can be actually negotiated on, we'll have to wait and see. But of course, this tortured nation desperately needs peace, and one only hopes that this is the start of something that can lead to a ceasefire, and that the Ukrainian people can eventually, in their millions, return to their own country. Guys?
Well, but there's another dimension to this crisis. Russia appealing to China to back it up and support it. And the Americans saying if that were to happen, then, there will be sanctions against China in a manner that China will not expect. And there will be a meeting in Rome today between the U.S. National Security Advisor and also Jake Sullivan and a ranking member of the Politburo. What do you think we can expect, from that meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right to raise the issue of China. To an extent, China has stood back from getting involved in this conflict, but we hear that Moscow has been appealing to China for weaponry. Now, we don't know what the Chinese response to all of that has been, but what the US will be very careful to try to resist is this alignment of Russia and China increasing, because at the end of this conflict, which surely will come to an end at some point, the world would, if that happens, be split between Russia and China on one side and the US and NATO countries on the other. And that, of course, is bad for world tensions and possibly ultimately world peace. So the Chinese position is very, very interesting. Also interesting, guys, is the position of African nations, including Nigeria. Now, some days ago, 28 African nations condemned Russian military action in Ukraine, including Nigeria. But the African countries are caught between a rock and a hard place here, because Abuja wants good relations with Moscow. There's a huge amount of food imported from Russia and Ukraine into countries like Nigeria, like soybeans, barley, wheat, sunflower oil. And of course, countries like Nigeria don't want to lose that input of trade. So countries like Nigeria are being very, very careful to stay non-aligned at the moment. Ultimately, though, one has to assume that countries like Nigeria will take a position. But this is a very situation of flux at the moment. Things are changing almost daily, and we'll have to just see what happens in the coming days. Guys?
All right. Okay.
What do you make of this Russian airstrikes on Yavoriv, near you in Lviv right now, which is really close to the Polish border, dangerously close to triggering Article 5 at the NATO countries? Why on earth would Russia be attacking basically right on Poland's doorstep? Is Russia trying to trigger World War III at this point?
Yeah, this was at the This was the Yarovov base, some less than 20 kilometers from the Polish border. In fact, it happened in the early morning at around 5 a.m. I was in a taxi going past it 3 or 4 hours later, and ambulances were screaming, sirens blaring along the road close to the base, taking the dying and the injured to hospital. 35 dead, 135 injured. It was an extremely dangerous adventure by Putin. It involved the launch of 30 cruise missiles from a base in Russia, which traveled from Russian territory around the Black Sea and then hundreds of miles north to hit this base. The significance of Russia hitting the base is that it's a major training center by NATO trainers of Ukrainian forces. It's also a transit point for military hardware going from NATO countries to Ukraine, and there were a number of irregular soldiers being trained there. So one can see why Moscow sees this as a legitimate target. But it was a very dangerous practice because, you know, cruise missiles are not accurate in every respect. They do go off course. And as I said earlier, it was just less than 20 kilometers from the Polish border, Poland, of course, being a member of NATO. Now, if one of those missiles had struck Polish soil, then immediately Article 5 of the NATO Convention would have been triggered. And as you say, we could have been on the brink of World War III. I mean, it doesn't seem... It seems almost trite to say that, and I can't believe as a journalist in 2022 I'm saying these words, that we were definitely on the brink of World War III, potentially. It didn't happen, thank goodness. But I think Putin was very, very lucky in this respect. Guys?
Right. Real quickly, John, number one will be, what's the feelers coming out of the talks Macron is having with Putin?
Well, of course, I'm in Western Ukraine at the moment, and it's hard for me to give some insight as to what's happening from Macron. But of course, Macron is relatively close to Putin. He's made at least 2 trips to Moscow to see the Russian leader, speaking on behalf of Europe in this. And we understand that Macron is obviously making pleas for the Russian leader to stop hostilities. And look, as long as they're talking, that's good news. And if Macron can have some influence on Putin and change his mind, change his tactics as to what's happening, change his mind on what's happening here in Ukraine, then so much the better. But we'll watch this space. Guys?
Thank you very much, John Cookson.